Hey there, hope you're doing well. In this video, we're going to take a reasonably quick look at one of our APIs, the Access Control List API. And we're going to talk about some of its features, and I'm going to tell you how you could possibly use it, integrate that API, and actually save a lot of time, effort, and money, and not reinvent the wheel from an access control dependency standpoint. You can have your web, mobile, or server-side teams work on your core customer problems and simply integrate the API and not do the heavy lifting of implementing it. So we're just going to take a look at some of its features. It does a number of things. We'll get to as much detail as we can in the next 10 to 15 minutes. And then if you have more questions, you're welcome to hit us up, and we can go from there. So let me actually share my screen. Okay. Let's take a look at our existing app. Our production app, one of our products is a web application, which is you could use that for managing projects at school, work, home, and everywhere else. Essentially, you can go to snowpal.com to check it out. Given that it's production data, I'm just going to go to a local deployment. So just ignore the quality of this data. This is just running on my machine. But to give context to the API that we're looking at, I'm not going to go into the details, but when you create content on our project management app, you can do just about anything you can expect to be able to do on project management solutions and beyond. One of our pieces of content is called blocks. It's the second level in our content hierarchy. I can actually share this with anybody. In this case, I've shared it with a couple of users, Parag 2 and 3. Again, it's dev data. That's why the naming is as dev as you can expect for it to be. Parag 2 has write access, Parag 3 has admin access. And this is me. Since I'm the one who's granting access, I need to be admin. That's our basic ACL model. Now, the API we're going to look at is the access control API, and you can go to accesscontrollist.api.snowpal.com, where the first access control list API is like dash delimited. Or you can even check out our developer documentation by going to developers.snowpal.com. I'm going to focus on the Postman collection for now, just for the purposes of this video. And remember this, in this simple example, somebody's asking you to implement a web app. Your React developer or React UI team is going to go start working on building this implementation or something like this. If they have the APIs available, the endpoints available, they can hit the ground running. The basic model is define, you publish a specification, and they can start coding to it. Implementing this page with the APIs being available already is going to be a whole lot easier and quicker. With React, you have tons of components. All you have to do is put the components together, understand your requirements, call the backend services, and you're good to go. But if you don't have let me reduce the volume a little bit. If you don't have the APIs or the endpoints, it's actually going to, it is going to take a lot more time. The idea behind us publishing our APIs as fundamental building blocks, and one of our APIs is actually called building blocks, but the rest of them are building blocks as well. They just help you build different aspects of whatever it is that you're building. It'll actually help you, hit the ground running really, really quickly. So if you took this as a requirement, read, write, and admin as 3 levels of access control, we have 3 privileges. So you can actually go in to this endpoint. Let's say all you have to do is the essential mapping, the member privileges. You essentially there are 3 privileges. We support the notion of custom privileges. So you would define 3 privileges, read, write, and admin privileges. Once you create those 3 privileges, we don't have a notion of roles, not yet in our existing implementation. A role is essentially a bag of privileges. Actually, let's jot down some of these terminologies here. It'll make it easier. Let me go here. Access control. That's the API. Okay, let's take a different shape. Privileges. We saw 3 of them. That's the lowest level. We saw read, write, and admin as 3 privileges. Those are just the snowpal.com's basic ACL model. Our API lets you create the simplest of access control for your application to the most complex that you can possibly imagine. The next is roles. A role is a bag of privileges. So you can, bucket all the privileges into roles. Actually, let me do this. Let me move it here. Roles and privileges. Let's give this a different color. We're going to call it members. And then we'll call this teams. I'm sharing. Yes, I am. Okay, let's just draw the arrows. Okay, what is a role? Role is nothing but a collection of privileges. Now in the example we just saw read, write, and admin. Read is essentially in our world anybody who has view access to this piece of content. If you grant them write, then they're able to make edits and changes to the content. And admin, once you have admin, you have all the access you possibly can have, which is in addition to read and write, you're able to grant access to this resource to other users and grant them access as well. That's our ACL model. So roles is a collection of privileges. We don't have a collection right now in the Snowpal implementation. In the web implementation, our API clearly supports that. So privileges, let's come up with different privileges to understand roles a bit better. Now, when you go to this content here, there's a lot of different attributes. And one of them is, say, a due date. And let's pretend that we want to have specific privilege that says edit all attributes, edit due date only, edit description. Just this is manufactured, so you can take that with a grain of salt. Now you have a collection of privileges for a role, so you can create a role that's basically, let's call it role, basic edit role. And this role will let somebody edit due date and edit description. It'll say the next one is advanced edit role is the name of the role. It lets you edit all attributes. Let's pretend, say if it's a single privilege, then the role may not make sense. I'm going to have to make this a little bit better. So edit all attributes, edit due date, edit description, edit tags. Okay, advanced edit role could be, let's forget the edit all attributes, edit tags. And there could be more edit, I don't know, comments or something. We have more attributes. So the second role has 3 privileges. The first one has 2. So what you would do here is essentially go create those privileges 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So create privileges is the first thing you would do. And after that, you would create a role. And when you create a role, you can associate privileges with that role while you create the role. Or you can just go associate privileges to the role once you create the role. I'm not going into the details of the actual endpoints. We have thousands of endpoints. So I obviously don't remember all of them. You can go look at the specification, which is what it is meant for. I'm going to assume they they support a lot of the attributes I'm going to socialize with you here. But the truth is literally what is stated in the specification. It's up to date. So just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and trust the specification as it's defined and published to you. So associate privileges to a role. So first we create a role and then we'll associate the privilege to this role. So the list of things that we would actually do, let's actually try to create a simple, not really. I don't want a grid. I wanted a list page. Okay, yep, let's do that. Okay, I don't want to worry about the format of it as much. Okay, ACL integration steps. This is what your UI team's experience is literally going to look like. They're going to review the access control specification, review access control API specification, And by review, I don't say they're going to spend hours. They're going to just spend a few minutes here, get a feel for it, and it's pretty self-descriptive. We also offer professional services. If you need help, we are more than happy to help you, hit the ground running as well. Okay, so what are the things we're doing? Review that, and then they start, let's say, we'll talk implementation, create privileges. In this case, we had 5 of them. Create 2 roles, associate privileges to each of those roles. Now, our implementation right now, currently as it stands, as I showed you here, let me go share. It's very straightforward. We want to keep it simple, intentionally so, to the target market that we are selling our project management application. But the idea behind our APIs is to be able to build the simplest of access control, to satisfy the simplest of access control requirements to the most complex ones at the same time. So we did not have roles, like I've said more than once, but in our example, we have 2 roles. And we associated the privileges. So we keep chugging along. Now, let me go here. What are members and teams? So here we granted, as we saw, we granted Parag 2 and 3 access directly. So they are members. So members are actually users who you grant access to. Members are users who access control is granted to. Okay, what are teams? Teams are much like what we saw earlier with the roles, a collection of users. So if you wanted to grant, let's say, let me copy the same note, the same color I meant. You could say, you could create teams called write users and another team called read users. And you could say Parag 1 and Parag 2 are write users. And then you could say Parag 3, Parag 10 for keep it simple, read users. Again, this is manufactured as you can tell, but hopefully it gives you the idea. Those are 2 teams that we've created essentially. So what we did here was after that we went ahead and created, you go here, we can go to collapse this. So the members are essentially existing users. So they are users of your system. Now those users could be coming from a different identity management system altogether, or you could use our APIs to create those users as well. So we have users where you can actually, the creation of the users is part of a different API. So you can either you combine another API and create these users and sign up. Like you could go to the, let's say, a building blocks API, for instance. Our project management or content management, we have, okay, I know what happened with Postman there. Okay, so there's a building blocks API and you can actually go into users and you can sign up. You go to registration and you can sign up a new user. Actually, you can do that here as well. Let me take it back. I forget. We actually, all of our APIs support the notion of registration, so you can sign up for users independently so without combining APIs, or you can use users that come from other systems and only use access control here for managing your authorization side of things. It's entirely up to you. But let's say you create users by registering them, and then after that you can create teams. If you go here, where are those? Where is the create team? Create team is here. So you'd go call create team. And then after you create a team, you would basically associate members to a team, much like we associated privileges to a role, as to each of these teams. Now that you've created all of that, you can start assigning, granting resources. Now, if you go down here, we have resources. Now you can grant, let me go to fetch teams, fetch, team roles. You have a lot of these endpoints. Let's actually go to privileges, member privileges, because, in terms of hierarchy, as you can imagine, it's, here is how I would write it down. I'm going to put it in double quotes. It's member privileges. Simplest thing, much like Snowpal does, assigning privileges, the read, write, etc. to members. Or you can assign privileges to teams, or you can create roles and assign roles to members, or you can create roles and teams, and then you can member privileges and team. Oh, hang on. What am I doing? Team roles, member roles, and team roles, right? So again, there's not really a hierarchy in that sense. I'm just saying the simplest thing to do is create privileges, assign it to members. The next simplest thing to do, hierarchy, maybe in terms of simplicity, if you will. Yeah, privileges, assign that to teams, or it could even be, maybe this is a better order. And yeah, we can create roles and assign to members, and then you can have privileges assigned to teams and roles to teams. I'm just saying that there's 4 variations of it. So it can be as simple as privileges to members, or it can be as complex as roles to teams, because roles is a collection of privileges and teams is a collection of users. So to me, I see this as the simplest one, and this is the most complex in terms of your structure. After you create those assignments, you basically take a particular resource, and we have these what is it? Assign roles to a team, fetch roles, blah, blah, blah. Let me actually go to resources, add or update a resource. You can check fetch nested resources and then add nested resources. You can look at the endpoints more carefully in our documentation that supports this as well, to get a sense of what each of them is specifically going to be doing. But it should suffice to say for this initial video that you can take any resource that you create on Snowpal using Snowpal APIs. Like I mentioned earlier, our APIs can be used independently. I mentioned earlier, perhaps not in this video, in a previous one. You can use our APIs independently or collectively. So if you go to projects, project management API is one of the APIs. You can create content like actual projects and cards, and then assign privileges, have permissioning associated with those resources. Now we can use our project management API to actually create the resources and bring those resources and grant access on those resources using this API. Or if your resource creation happens natively through your APIs, or you're integrating other third-party solutions, that's all right. You can just get the resources and use the resource ID to essentially grant access on those resources through our access control API. That's the idea. You bring the resource ID. Here, I believe, what do we have here? Our resource, we have a nested resource. It's location. Location could be USA as a country, and then state of Virginia. Within Virginia, you have Reston and Herndon. So this is a nested resource, and you're granting access, some kind of access, either privileges or roles to teams or members, to this resource. You have a resource, and then you're granting access on that resource. You're granting certain level of access. That's what you're doing using this particular API. Once you grant access to this, let me close this, to this resource. Now you can then fetch, make the request to do the fetch. So let me go, let's say team privileges. It says assign, what does it say? Assign privileges on resource to a team. If you go to like member privileges, it's going to say assign privileges on a resource to a member. So you basically pass a resource ID, a name and a title, and then you pass a certain level. We'll not get into the details of what level is, not in this initial one. It's just going to make it a little bit more complex than it needs to be. It just gives you more power in actually structuring the hierarchy of your access. That's what a level is. So once you grant access to it, you can then say, fetch privileges assigned to team on a resource. You can say fetch highest privileged levels on a resource for a team, which means you want to know whether somebody has admin access. It's a custom privilege or a custom role that you create. But in the case of the Snowpal implementation, if I wanted to know, hey, who has the highest level of access? The highest access is defined by admin. Who has the highest access on this particular fetch highest privilege level on resource for this team? So you could have many teams that have access to a particular resource. Each of the team has any number of members associated with them. This endpoint is basically saying, hey, get me the highest privilege level on this resource for a given team. For this team, product team versus the development team, the product team has access to this resource and they have a lot of privileges with different levels, privilege level IDs. Get me the highest privilege because I'm going to make some determination based on that response. If they have that privilege, I let them do something. If they don't have it, I don't let them do something else. That's one example, but you can imagine how complex this implementation can possibly be. But the idea behind us publishing these APIs is so we can deal with all of the complexity ourselves and have you and your UI teams actually built to integrate these APIs and not worry about implementing this. You know, just take a moment to think about defining the specification, implementing it, deploying it, upgrading it, enhancing it, making it scalable, and doing more and more and more. That is not going to necessarily add value to you because that's probably not your core competence. You're trying to solve a different business problem. You should focus your energies in solving that problem and leaving the rest of the back end heavy lifting that's pretty agnostic and fundamental and generic to us. So in terms of integration steps, we have this, let me put that in. Okay. So you created the teams, and then let me go back here. Now we're going to associate, I'm going to say either create a resource if you have to, then you're going to associate, I'm going to say grant access to resource. Okay, grant access on resource to members or teams, and where access can be defined as privileges or roles. And it could be a combination. A single resource can have n number of privileges and roles granted to members and teams. So the actual structure can be as complex as you need for it. Imagine this where you're actually granting privileges to members, privileges to teams, roles to members, and roles to teams. So this page can get as complex as needs to be, but your UI team only needs to worry about designing and implementing and making it friendly for your end users, whether it's a React page or a Flutter page, whether it's a mobile app, native mobile app, or a web app, it does not matter. Or you might be building some other microservices that have access control dependencies. You just delegate those dependencies to our APIs and not worry about reinventing the wheel. So that's so you grant access, and then you check at runtime when somebody's going to access something. Check if user or check if member has relevant and necessary access to resource. I'm actually trivialize. Hopefully I can minimize this, but I don't know whether this lets me. Okay. I'll leave that way. I want to reduce the size of this, but I don't know whether this tool supports it. Okay. Anyway, so you can check if the member has access. Now imagine having all of this readily available to you. Super simple, right? And that's how it should be. All that you have to do is either go to aws.snowpal.com and it'll redirect you to the Amazon's marketplace. You can go to access control API, do a couple of clicks, and you'll get the API key and the product code and you can start using it. You can pay by request or subscription. It's super affordable. And if you want us to put together a private offer, we are happy to do that as well. And some of our clients have asked us that, hey, we like what you offer, but we want to be able to manage that in our own infrastructure. We are able to make that available. We are able to provision this in your infrastructure that's on AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. Or you can simply license the API and have us be out of the picture. You purchase the license and then the upgrade license as you deem appropriate, and you can integrate that into your code base, repos, and your whole DevOps infrastructure. How you do the integration is it could be as simple as you leveraging APIs as a SaaS model, or essentially you purchasing licenses and making it part of your infrastructure. There's many ways we can make this happen. The idea is to give you all the time back, mitigate your risks, so you're not your server-side teams, if you don't have a team and you don't have to staff, hire, and maintain and manage a team, it's going to make it super affordable. Or if you do have a team, they could be doing something else that they charter to do, as opposed to doing things that they don't have to do because it's already available, and you're not finding, your customers wouldn't find value in you simply doing what is already there. That's the idea. So with that, I think I'm going to end this video. Hope it makes sense. If you have any questions, definitely let us know. We are more than happy to help you out. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.